In my past life, I married the Prince of Wei, and it went spectacularly badly on my deathbed. I swore two things. First, if I got another chance, I'd be a good person. Second, I'd leave this imperial city that had trapped me my whole life. For those wishes I'd move heaven and earth. But I never imagined someone else would half kill themselves trying to make them come true. That I brawled with my former love rival inside the Empress Dowager's chambers, got thrown out, and, still not done, we arranged to settle things in the Imperial Garden. That I have to say, I never would have guessed that Chai Qingxue, who I remembered as dainty and fragile, could be this fierce. Her delicate brows shot up. Are you done? I said I'll go for the peace marriage. The hell you will. Chai Qingxue, have you read so many books your brain shrunk? You're going to fight me over this too? In my past life, just so I could marry the Prince of Wei. You're wrong. I framed her for the peace marriage mission. The day she left the city, she wept like rain-drenched blossoms, nearly shattered with grief. Why this change of heart in this life? But whatever the reason, this time I absolutely cannot let her go. That I put on my villainous act, rolled up my sleeves, stretched onto my toes, grabbed hold of her trailing cloud bun, and threatened like a madwoman. You're not going, you hear? Fight me again, and I'll rip every last hair out. In the next instant, she gave me a taste of my own medicine. Both hands shot up, seized my double loop updo, and her glare outdid mine. Let's see who goes bald first. My maid Ayan and Chai Qingxue's maid Sonon came to a silent understanding. Both of them huddled shivering under the osmanthus tree, staring at their mistresses and not daring to step. Ayan, my head spun from the shaking, but I wouldn't relent. Don't you love the Prince of Wei? He loves you too. Why throw him aside and wade into this mess? Doesn't the county princess love the prince even more than I do? That shut me right up. It was true that I did love Prince Wrong. Or more precisely, it wasn't love, it was obsession. That I'm the daughter of the Marquis of Ningguo and the Empress Dowager's grandniece. My parents died young, so I was raised under the Empress Dowager's wing, spoiled rotten, and naturally became a walking catalog of bad habits. Wrong was a prince, 3 years older than me. That I grew up right on his heels. Women in the palace didn't see many men, I least of all, a face like Wrong's, born to break hearts from childhood, ruins you for life at first glance. I had a fierce possessive streak, none of that maidenly modesty. Since I was little, I styled myself his future consort. Girls who flocked to him earned my scowls and sharp tongue at best. At worst, my murderous intent, so naturally, my ending was perfection. The day Chai Qingxue left for her peace marriage, Wrong stabbed me in the chest and raged about my venomous heart. 3 years in his residence, and not once did he step into my chambers. That he treated me like a snake or a scorpion, avoiding me at all costs. After his coronation, in theory I should have been empress, but he loathed me so much I didn't even get a title, just consort Lin. Before I married him, people cursed me behind my back, but still showed every courtesy to my face. After I married him, the masks came off, and everyone laughed at me openly. But to my dying day, I never learned to wear a mask, never learned to lie low or play weak. The louder the mockery, the more outlandish and domineering I became. In the end, after I poisoned his favorite consort, I was confined to my chambers, forbidden to leave. Then someone poisoned me mute, and I died on a long, frozen winter night. As I lay dying, I made 3 wishes. First, if I had another chance, I'd be a good person. Second, I'd leave this imperial city that had caged me my whole life. And third, maybe if I didn't cling so desperately to marrying Wrong, the first 2 wishes might come true. That thought, I met Chai Qingxue's eyes and said truthfully, I don't love him anymore. A flash of surprise crossed her face, then a cold little smile. A month ago you were still brawling in the market with General Zhong's daughter over the Prince of Wei. She beat you black and blue, remember? Oof, that slap back came awfully fast, but I only came back to life today. I just happened to run into the Empress Dowager when she asked, and I immediately spoke up for the peace marriage. There was no time to ease into a new persona. I coughed lightly to cover my embarrassment and frantically hunted for a face-saving reply. Right then, a voice rang out nearby. Well, I've lived long enough to see noble young ladies brawling today. My eyes have truly been opened. Chai Qingxue and I turned together. In a carved railing pavilion a few yards away stood a man with a face like jade, sharp and gallant, who knew how long he'd been watching. Beside him, his guard's face was so coal-black and rough-featured that it set off his own elegance all the more. Like an immortal stepped forth, dashing and rakish. Jiang Muchen to my distant cousin, the Empress Dowager's nephew. That man never really saw eye to eye with me. Jiang Muchen sauntered closer, his expression darkening. Still not letting go? What's this? Did wrecking the Empress Dowager's audience chamber not satisfy you? Now you want to wreck the whole palace. I glared at Chai Qingxue. She lets go first. The delicate girl refused to back down. Why should I? If you stop fighting me for the peace marriage, then I'll let go. Oh, now she's got nerve, I sneered. Fight you, my foot. I told the Empress Dowager first. Jiang Muchen was silent for a moment, then circled us twice and laughed. I really wonder what the son of the Prince of Jinshuan would think if he saw this. Two great beauties of the capital wrestling each other for the chance to marry him. His heart must be dancing. At those words, Chai Qingxue's grip on my hair loosened a fraction. She frowned, looking baffled. Son of the Prince of Jinshuan? Young Master Jian didn't answer right away. That he snapped open his folding fan with a phony flourish and said, Indeed, I hear this Jiang Muchen, son of the Prince of Jinshuan, is bloated in build and rough in face. Always wears a demon mask. Word is, the sight of him makes the enemy so nauseous they sometimes turn and flee without a fight. No sooner had he finished than Chai Qingxue released my double loops, curtsied, and said, Forgive the spectacle, everyone. Since that's the case, Qingxue will not steal what the county princess so dearly desires. I'll take my leave now. And with that, she spun around and walked off, as if she'd just had a sudden enlightenment. All her earlier stubbornness gone. I stared at her swiftly retreating figure and snorted. Little wench, thought you could beat me? Jiang Muchen paid no mind to Chai Qingxue's rudeness. His narrow, slanted fox eyes skewered me, and his voice carried a thread of mockery. What's this? Cousin doesn't mind that the man is ugly? That doesn't sound like you. That I recall you've always had a sharp eye for pretty faces. I'm no fool. I could hear the barb in his words, but clashing head-on didn't seem wise. That I jabbed a finger toward his soot-faced guard and said crossly, Couldn't be uglier than him. Then, ignoring Jiang Muchen entirely, I turned and walked away. Behind me, all I left was a peal of hearty laughter. Back at my residence, I lifted a teacup, slurped a mouthful, and tried to calm my nerves. Truth was, I was nowhere near as relaxed as I'd acted. For now I could only take things one step at a time. First, put distance between myself and the Prince of Wei. Just as the thought formed, I saw a very familiar person, with very familiar fury and a very familiar sword, storm into the garden. Ayan's voice shook. Your Highness, the Prince of Wei doesn't look too happy. Should we hide? Hide my head, he's already seen us. That's what I said, but my hand had no pride left. It grabbed the Tianmu teacup from the table and pressed it protectively over my chest. The man came closer, sharp-browed and bright-eyed, standing like a cypress tree. Only the rage in his features was way too intimidating to save my skin. I hurriedly blurted, "Whoa, whoa, calm down, it's me going for the peace marriage, not Chai Qingxue." The fury on Yurong's face didn't ease, if anything, it thickened. "Why are you going?" I was baffled. I glanced at the sword hilt near his waist and asked weakly, "Hold on, so I can't go either?" Yurong's whole frame trembled, as if he was about to slaughter me. "You?" My upper body was imperceptibly, at a snail's pace, inching backward. I was already calculating which direction to dodge when he drew that sword. Then his next words sent my unsteady backside straight to the ground. "Weren't you going to marry me?" I sat on the floor and stared at his face, flushed white, and our my lips, rounded in shock, only managed to sound a few seconds later. Don't you hate me?" He faltered for an instant, then his expression hardened back to normal. He sniffed. "Quite right. Who would like a sticky rice cake like you?" "Rice cake?" Fair enough that I'd clung to him like a leech in my past life. I was the ultimate sticky rice cake. That I let out a dry laugh. "Ha ha ha. Thanks, I guess." Then he said nothing, just fixed me with frost in his eyes. Seeing he had no intention of leaving, I dragged out my words, trembling. Does His Highness want to stay for dinner?" Somehow, that set him off again. The veins bulged at his neck, and he flung his sleeve and stalked away. At the gate he halted, turned back, and seemed to force the words through clenched teeth. "Lin Erhuan, you're really something." I almost tossed another thanks at him, but when I saw his knuckles gone white around the sword hilt, I shrank back and chickened out. After he left, I put the teacup back on the table. My palm was filmed with sweat. First time seeing him since my rebirth. I put on a breezy front, but inside there was still a stir, a mix of fear and bitterness. "Whoa." Ayan's bright voice broke the frozen air. I looked over. She was sticking her thumb up at me. "Your Highness, that play hard to get move was brilliant." I turned to her, sighed, and said, "Ayan, I honestly don't love him anymore." She obviously didn't believe me. Fair enough, in my past life, to marry Yurong, I went into his residence alone. Just because he said marriage was fine, but I couldn't bring Ayan in his eyes, since I was so wicked. My personal maid must have cooked up plenty of schemes. So Ayan, who'd grown up with me, was sent back to our hometown and married off to a lame brute who beat her and cursed her in the end. She couldn't take it and drowned herself. Yurong told me all this after I was permanently confined to my chambers. He also said that fate never misses. No one tied to me would come to a good end. My parents died early because of my ill star, and even my maid met a brutal end. All because I'd sinned so deeply, piled up evil so high that I didn't want to live by then, and I shot back. Is that so? And what about you? Will your end be a good one? He was the emperor, the supreme sovereign, holding the power of life and death. That one insult to his majesty enraged him past control. He struck me across the face, but he didn't kill me. Back then I still held a sliver of delusion, thinking he couldn't bear to. But when I lay alone in that perpetually cold palace year after year, my body failing thread by thread, I understood. He wanted me to slowly, fully taste that long stretch of loneliness and torment. Torment like that once is enough. Thinking back now, it was the isolation of that cold palace that taught me a bitter, self-mocking humor. Otherwise, how could I face him so lightly now? I stared at Ayan's round, silver plate face and asked, "Ayan, if I married into the Wei residence and didn't take you with me, would you be sad?" Ayan's mouth fell open. After a long moment she mumbled, "Of course I'd be sad. But if marrying the Prince of Wei makes your Highness so happy, then even leaving me behind would be worth it." My nose stung and tears spilled out. Ayan panicked. Your Highness, did I say something wrong? I wiped the tears away, took her hand, and said firmly, don't worry that I end this life. Wherever I go, I'm taking you with me. Before, when I clung to Yurong, it drove him crazy. Now that I wasn't clinging, he kept making trouble for me every couple of days. Men really are cheap. Can't stand the drop in attention, so they come around acting cheap. Sure enough, he went to the Empress Dowager and told her I hadn't shown up at the Zishan Hall for studies in days, and hadn't practiced riding or archery. The whole reason I wasn't going was to avoid him, but he just had to rush to see me. Still, I didn't want to go anywhere. I huddled in my residence, putting on fat. Only, whatever bewitching tonic he fed the Empress Dowager, she decreed I absolutely had to attend the polo match. Fine. Today, this lady will give you a grand entrance. A few days of recuperating at home, and my mental state was pretty much back. But if I saw him, it'd just make my blood boil. Sure enough, the moment I reached the field, I could feel that ice-cold gaze of his through 2 or 3 canopy tents that I couldn't care less. I went straight for my little red horse and kept far away. Ayan had her eye on a pair of plum blossom patterned gold bracelets, so I won them for her. Planned to quietly give them to her once. We got home. After one round, my throat was parched and I headed back to the tent for some water, and as luck would have it, I ran right into Zhongyu, who was equally thirsty. This general's daughter came from a martial family, but was notoriously sharp-tongued and spiteful. Before either of us was married, we used to throw punches over Yurong all the time. Later, after he took the throne and brought her into the palace as a consort, our clashes never stopped. Now, meeting her face to face, I was doing my utmost to keep myself from seeing red. But some people just can't help stirring up trouble. Zhongyu's smile was all honey and blade. That last round wasn't bad, Your Highness, but I can see your riding skills have slipped since 2 years ago. A couple laps, and you're already winded. Seems you need a serious tonic. I didn't want to fight. I laughed dryly. Yeah, you're right. She hadn't expected me to be so calm. She rubbed her hands together and pressed harder. Why aren't you cursing at me? Honestly, were these people just born with toxic blood? You said yourself I need a tonic. Cursing wastes energy. I have to rest up. Zhongyu sized me up. Lin Erhuan, you're different from before. I couldn't be bothered to explain that. I just brushed it off. I'm drained, so of course I'm different. As soon as the words left my mouth, Yurong's voice cut in. Is that so? If you're that weak, yet you still want to go through with a peace marriage, are you just tired of living? I turned around. He was leaning against the red lacquered tent pole, looking at me thoughtfully. That man. Why does his mouth have to be so sharp? I ran my finger along the rim of my cup and met his eyes. I hear the Prince of Wei has wide connections and knows plenty of sages and strange talents. Then please, Prince of Wei, help me find a good physician who can check my pulse and nurse me back to health, so I can live a few more years once I'm sent to the Prince of Jinshuan's domain. Yurong's gaze darkened, clearly angry again. Zhongyu looked completely incredulous. No way, Lin Erhuan, you're really going through with a peace marriage. I drained the last of my tea and set the cup down on the side table with a clack. Yes. Time to see a different world. What's the point of always staying cooped up in the palace? With that, I walked toward the exit. As I passed Yurong, his ice-cold voice stopped me. I've never seen anyone so shameless. The Empress Dowager and the Emperor haven't even decided on the peace marriage yet, and you're rushing to find yourself a husband. Shameless? That day your beloved Chai Qingxue brawled with me in the palace. Why didn't you call her shameless? You just zeroed in on me. By all rights, the Prince of Wei should be thinking about how to keep his true love, not wasting his energy on me. He stepped up beside me and looked down from his lofty height. How ridiculous. When have I ever wasted my energy on you? Even though I told myself I didn't care anymore, those words still sent an unavoidable chill through my heart. Maybe because I didn't answer, he kept on, every word a needle. What's the matter? You used to be so glib, so full of words. Now you've got nothing to say? I raised my head and met his mocking glare with a frosty smile of my own. Is that so? Since your highness says you've never wasted any thought on me, then please stay out of my business, whether I go to school or study archery or horseback riding. Running to your elders to tattle is something a 3-year-old would do. That hit home. For a moment he was speechless. He smoldered a while, then recovered his cold, prideful look and said, "A member of the royal house wasting time, seeking no advancement. Can that really be justified? Even if I'm wasting my time, it's none of your business." I turned and walked off, leaving that frozen stare behind me. Bitter and stifled, I wandered through the woods around the racecourse alone, coming to a parasol tree and seeing no one around. My old wild temper from a previous life burst out that I whipped out my riding crop and lashed the trunk violently. To think I'd done such wicked things for that man in a past life. Such a lovesick fool. Why, after all that suffering, do I still have to see him again? So aggravating. With every thought, the force of my blows increased. Suddenly a voice came from above. "Your Highness, why take it out on a tree?" I looked up. Sunlight stabbed through the branches right into my eyes. Blurring the person's face, I shaded my brow with my hand, and a strange yet familiar face came into focus. It was that hideous guard from Jiang Muchen's side. "What were you doing up there?" The ugly man leaped down from the tree, light as a swallow, and landed before me. That a leaf waltzed down and landed neatly on his hairpin crown. He brushed it aside. "Answering your highness. I was resting there. I just dozed off when I saw your highness furiously lashing a tree." He was very tall. Talking to him meant tilting my chin up, but I felt that made me a little more imposing. "Are you blaming me for waking you?" "Hardly. I fell asleep out of boredom, but watching you whip the tree was actually rather entertaining. Helped ease the tedium." I feigned offense. "Huh, so I've become your amusement." His expression didn't change. He said evenly, "If people could amuse one another, that might be a fine thing. So by your logic, even mockery is a good thing." "Certainly not. But in the end, it depends on how you take it." He smiled, his eyes like stars. I felt a strange flash of beauty there, but when I looked more closely, that rough, ugly face still forced me to look away. Only now did I notice the scar across his already dark, coarse forehead. So ugly. But ugly as he was, his words had some sense to them. "What's your name?" "I'm called Qian Miao." Ugly man, and an ugly name. That I pursed my lips. "Keep me company for a chat." He smiled. "All right, but don't smile at me." The smile vanished, replaced by confusion. "Why? Am I not even allowed to smile?" I climbed onto the small mound at the base of the tree to make myself as tall as possible. "When you smile, your face scrunches up and looks even worse. That it bothers me." After a long pause, Qian Miao burst out laughing. I stared at him. This man was surprisingly magnanimous. Calling him ugly, and he still laughed. He rubbed his brow, his eyes brimming with laughter as he looked at me. "Your Highness, that's the second time you've called me ugly. If you say it a third time, even I will get hurt." I cleared my throat lightly. "Fine, I won't say it anymore. From now on, I'll only think it." Qian Miao pressed his forehead and gave a wry laugh. This man, I told him not to smile, and now he's laughing even harder. I picked up a stick and began doodling in the dirt. Qian Miao leaned against the tree, arms crossed. "Your Highness won a pair of bracelets." I waggled my wrist and nodded. He went on. Would you like to win something really good? I stroked the gold bracelets and shrugged dismissively. These are good things too. I heard the very best prize today is a night pearl from the Empress Dowager's phoenix crown. I gave him a glance, then broke the branch into a dozen little pieces and squatted down to build a bridge. I'm not interested. Your Highness is part of the royal family. You should understand even better than I do that a night pearl from a phoenix crown is like an imperial plaque of immunity. It can be extremely useful in a tight spot. That made me lift my head, that's right. How could I have forgotten? In my past life, the Empress Dowager decreed my marriage to Yurong. Back then, I was smitten with him, so I went along willingly. But if in this life the Empress Dowager issues the same decree, what excuse would I have to refuse? Defying an imperial edict would be huge trouble. But if I had the night pearl, I'd have a bargaining chip of my own. Yet this man had only met me once. Why was he telling me this? I fixed my eyes on him. What's your motive for telling me this? He met my gaze squarely and said unhurriedly, that day, Your Highness fought the Prime Minister's daughter in the palace over the peace marriage that I may not know why you're so set on going. But I can guess. You've got some trouble and need to get far away from the capital. If Your Highness holds the night pearl, whether or not you go through with the marriage, at least you'll have some leverage when trouble comes knocking. A chill ran down my spine. This man's mind was frighteningly sharp that I forced myself to stay calm as I watched him. He sensed my distrust and clasped his hands in a salute. I meant no harm by any of this. Your Highness is Lord Jian's younger cousin. It's only natural for me to help you. Besides, I feel a particular kinship with you, like old friends on first meeting that I don't want to see you caught up in trouble. Whether he was telling the truth or not, I really did want that night pearl that I took a step forward. The night pearl is precious. You and I know that, and everyone else does too. My polo skills aren't top-notch that if I go out there, I might not win. Qian Miao's eyes narrowed slightly. Today, the only person able to challenge Your Highness on the field is General Zhong's daughter. No one else. Beating her won't be difficult. Are you serious? I licked my lips. Not that I want to boost her morale, but Zhong Yu's polo skills are unmatched among the noble ladies of the capital. Even if I fought tooth and nail, I might not manage a draw. She has a weakness. Her right wrist is inflexible, so she relies on her left hand. If Your Highness forces her to hit with her right, you won't necessarily lose. I was stunned. How do you know? One can tell by watching closely. I frowned. Wouldn't that be winning by underhanded means? Not a ripple in Qian Miao's voice. A win is a win. Besides, it's not a war. Nobody gets hurt. I returned to the race field, and that nuisance Zhong Yu came right up to provoke me again. Just now the Prince of Wei won a very fine sword for me, and he's even invited me to the Lantern Festival. I didn't even bother giving her a look that I said lazily, keep bragging, and when the Lantern Festival comes, I'll come ruin your little date. You. Zhong Yu let out a cold snort, then she squinted at me. I knew it. You still haven't given up on the Prince of Wei. Saying you'll go through with a peace marriage, it's all just playing hard to get. I scratched my nose and replied with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Think whatever you like. She'd been trying to provoke me, but my indifference made her face flush red. Just then, a eunuch on the field called out, by the Empress Dowager's decree, one night pearl. Zhong Yu's eyes shifted. Lin Erhuan, how about this? You and me, a polo match. If you win, I'll never fight you over the Prince of Wei again. But if I win, from now on, you can't exchange a single word with him. I spat out a grape skin, curled my lip, and said, I just want the night pearl. Zhong Yu pulled her riding crop from her sash and thrust her chin out smugly. Don't act so tough that you'll be crying your eyes out when you lose, Lin Erhuan. I flicked a glance at her right wrist and smiled. Who's afraid of whom? The match began. As that ugly man said. Zhong Yu's right hand was clearly clumsy. Even so, her skill far exceeded mine that I had to push to my limits just to keep the score. Even. My strength gradually drained. The match reached its boiling point. With the final goal to decide the winner, I played my trump card. I threw my whole body onto the reins, one foot dangling, the other planted in the stirrup, forcing Zhong Yu to use her right hand to swing. A young, unfamiliar player on my team saw the opening and charged in to press her from the right. Caught off guard, Zhong Yu's mallet was knocked aside. The ball rolled from beneath the horse's hooves right to me. I swung hard and scored, but in the next instant, my horse's hoof slipped. I lost balance and slammed into the ground. Seconds later, the pain flooded Ayan. My left shoulder and arm felt like they'd been crushed by a bludgeon, the agony making me tremble. Zhong Yu came storming over, whip in hand, shrieking, "Lin Erhuan, you cheated." Her hand holding the whip was trembling. I kept feeling like that whip would come down on me at any moment. Through a blur, I saw a group of people hurrying over. I never expected the one leading them to be Yurong. He scooped me up and strode away quickly, ordering the attendant beside him, "Prepare a carriage to the Marquis's residence." Behind us, Zhong Yu shouted, "This match doesn't count. Lin Erhuan rigged it. She won by underhanded means." Yurong ignored her and carried me on. Maybe it was my imagination, but his eyes were full of worry. Thankfully, no bones were broken. The imperial physician prescribed some salves for bruising and abrasions, then left. The pain was so bad, I didn't even care that Yurong was still in the room. I just gasped for breath and moaned. Yurong walked up to my bedside, still wearing that ice-block face. After a long silence, he said coldly, "Lin Erhuan, what am I supposed to say to you? For a win, you schemed, resorted to tricks, and even risked your life." I winced in pain, but my tongue stayed sharp. "Whether I risk my life or not, what business is it of yours? Didn't you play that match for my sake?" I opened my eyes wide that I wanted the Night Pearl so I could refuse the Empress Dowager's marriage decree later. Did he somehow know that? Impossible. But his expression gave away nothing unusual. I asked, "If you already know, then don't bother me in the future." For some reason, the tips of his ears reddened. He coughed lightly. "You really did it for me." I recalled what Zhong Yu said before the match and realized he'd misunderstood. That I smiled faintly. You'd keep your distance from me." His brow furrowed sharply, his eyes instantly burning with anger. "You." But the anger flickered out in seconds. He gave a cold laugh. "Haven't you tired of playing these little games, pushing and pulling? Playing hard to get, playing hard to get." I was so sick of hearing it. Every single person who met me said the same thing. Didn't they have any other words? I closed my eyes and said crossly, "Just leave." Yurang's expression darkened. With a flick of his cloak, he strode out. But at the doorway he suddenly turned back and hurled a brocade box onto the table. "The Night Pearl you wanted," he said coldly. Then, without another word, he turned and was gone. Deep into the quiet night, Ayan was dozing by my bed. After her head thumped against the bed frame for the 13th time, I woke her and told her to go back to her room. Her voice thick with sleep, she protested, "Princess, I must attend you." I glanced at the red mark on her forehead and said helplessly, "You're like a temple gong. Before you've finished attending me, I'm afraid you'll have knocked yourself out." Ayan pouted, looking at me plaintively. "All right, sleep in the small room next door. I'll ring the bell if I need you." As I spoke, I glanced up at the brass bell hanging from the bed canopy and murmured an acknowledgement, moved the bell cord a little closer to my pillow, and then, glancing back every few steps, finally went into the side room. The pain kept me awake that I couldn't move at all, so I just stared blankly at the brocade box on the table, so lost in thought that I didn't even notice someone standing right by my bed. Until a dark shadow fell over me that a little white porcelain bottle was placed quietly into. The medicine box beside me that I almost screamed, but the shadow moved lightning fast. A hand clamped over my open mouth. Not asleep yet. The voice asked that I made a grab for the bell cord, but the shadow had anticipated me and pinned my hand down too. It's me, Qian Miao. He shifted slightly, letting the moonlight from outside outline his profile. In that light, he looked nothing like the unbearable sight he was by day. There was even a cool, remote elegance to him. I've come to bring you medicine, princess. Please don't be afraid, and whatever you do, don't cry out, or my life is forfeit. I blinked. Slowly, he removed his hand. I stared at him, whispering fiercely, "Have you lost your mind? Sneaking into the Marquis's residence at night? Aren't you afraid you'll be beaten to death?" He corrected me. "It's a night visit." With that, he took the white porcelain bottle from the medicine box and shook it gently. "You were injured in that fall. The medicine the imperial physician prescribed will help you recover, but it can't relieve your pain. This medicine I've brought will ease the pain, at least enough to let you get a real night's sleep." My eyes followed the bottle in his hand. Qian Miao seemed to see right through me. Instantly, he took a little black pill from it and swallowed it himself. "It's not poisonous if your highness doesn't trust me. I'll stay here half an hour. You can see for yourself whether the poison takes me." I gave a hollow laugh. "What are you saying? Surely I wouldn't measure a gentleman's heart by my own petty suspicions. All right then, since I can't sleep anyway, keep me company for a while. The medicine can wait. I'll take it later." Qian Miao smiled slightly and fixed his gaze on me, saying nothing. His stare unsettled me. "What is it?" I asked. "Has the poison started working?" He shook his head. His eyes were soft, his voice low, thick with apology. "Forgive me, princess, that I never should have let you fight in that match." I let out a breath, lifting one hand feebly. "Why blame you? If I hadn't wanted that night pearl so badly, not even the heavenly emperor himself could have dragged me into that arena." I nodded toward the box on the table and added, "If anything, I should thank you. Without your guidance, I'd never have won it." He glanced back at the brocade box, yet his expression showed not the slightest ripple. "Now I understand your temperament, princess," he said. "In the future, I'll make sure you never have to throw yourself into such reckless danger again." The corners of my mouth tugged. "Something worth wanting, you have to fight to earn." Qian Miao lifted a hand and brushed a strand of hair from my lips. His bright eyes held mine, full of words that never escaped. Perhaps it was the indistinct moonlight that blurred his features, but I found only a sky brimming with starlight in his gaze. And somehow it threw my heart completely out of rhythm that I dropped my eyes to the hand he was about to withdraw and changed the subject. "It really is true. Ugly as you are, your hands are actually beautiful." His hand froze midair. A few seconds passed, and then a soft laugh. "Even at a time like this, your highness still refuses to stop picking on me." I pressed my lips together. "I mean it. Strong knuckles, long and graceful fingers. They look quite mismatched with the rest of you." He leaned a little closer. "Princess, am I truly so hideous that you must bring it up constantly?" The sudden nearness snuffed out the moonlight. In the darkness, all sound vanished but two breaths, one calm and even, the other hurried and ragged that I swallowed without thinking, then forced a lame little cough. "I don't bring you up constantly. And why are you so close? You're blocking the light." He didn't budge. Through clenched teeth, I threatened, "Move your head away, or I'm pulling the bell cord." At that, Qian Miao actually reached out and gave the cord a sharp tug. The bright jangle echoed through the room. I held my breath, eyes wide, already picturing the gruesome execution he'd face. When, right on cue, a hearty snore came from the side room. Qian Miao chuckled softly. Your handmaiden really does sleep soundly. Even though I doubted he could see me in the dark, I still rolled my eyes. Truly, you are peerless. I shut my eyes, determined to ignore him. But then he picked up the white bottle from the bedside and said evenly, "Half an hour has passed, Your Highness, and I have not been poisoned. You may take the pill without worry." I peeked at him and gave a grudging He took out a pill and placed it gently between my lips. His fingertips were cool, his touch feather soft. Then, with a quiet "sleep well," he melted into the darkness. That I have to say, the medicine that scoundrel Qian Miao gave me really was remarkably effective. The moment I took it, the pain dulled sharply, and I fell asleep much more quickly than before. Over the next fortnight, my injuries largely healed. While I was recovering, Yurang came to visit twice. Both times, I sent him away seething. Then came the annual Lantern Festival. Merchants from all over peddled local delicacies and novelties, and every kind of colored lantern filled the streets. It was spectacular and rowdy. In past years, I would have been sure to go. This year, I had no wish to. The very thought of running into Yurang made me want to wall myself in doubt. If I couldn't provoke him, at least I could hide. But Ayan wheedled and cooed until I gave in, because I wanted to spoil her. So I went along, reluctant as I was. As soon as we reached the festival, I was instantly dazed by all the strange and curious trinkets. I stood by a sugar figure stall, waiting for Ayan to return with snowball hawthorn candies, watching the vendor with every kind of sugar figure stuck in his hair, laughing along with the kids. While I laughed, inside I sighed. Running a small business was no easy thing. Then I turned my head, and there in the crowd was Yurang, staring straight at me. My heart sank. That I turned and fled in the opposite direction. The moment I pivoted, I crashed straight into someone's chest. Before I could apologize, a familiar voice said, "Princess, in such a hurry, whatever for?" I looked up and was met by the ferocious, grinning face of a Taotai mask. My gaze darted behind me. "Qian Miao, get me out of here. There's someone I really don't want to see on my tail." Beneath the mask, the corners of his mouth curved. "Hide and seek is my specialty." In a heartbeat, he slapped a mask onto my face, caught me by the hand, and ran. I glanced back. Under the festive lanterns, Yurang's fury and panic were written clear. He shoved through the surging crowd, chasing after us. But our headlong dash gradually shrank him into a fading speck. The TA corner. Qian Miao led me onto a glossy dark horse, and we bolted straight for the outskirts of the city. A brilliant moon hung overhead, and the wind sang in our ears. I laughed wildly, with none of the prim restraint of a proper young lady, and shouted like one of the rough fellows, "Damn, this feels good." It was the first moment of true release since my rebirth. Hooves flew, splashing through puddles. Qian Miao shook the reins and smiled into my ear. The days of feeling good are only just beginning. We rode to a broad, open hillside, reined in the horse, and dismounted. Facing a sky scattered with stars, I let out a great yell, expelling the stifling murk from my chest. I want to see an even wider sky. Qian Miao stood with his hands behind his back, turned his head, and watched me for a long time before he finally said, "If you had a chance to do it, would you dare?" I shot him a look. Why wouldn't I? Then I pulled off my mask and saw what he'd put on me. An ugly, fearsome boar. I punched his shoulder. "Why give me a mask this hideous?" He laughed aloud. "By day, Your Highness is always radiant and flawless, never a trace of ugliness. I merely wondered what you might look like while playing ugly." What twisted taste! I grumbled. My fingers traced the boar's tusks. Now I realize, being ugly is rather a good thing. That a face too striking makes it hard for people to see what lies beneath. As I said it, my mind was on Yu Rang's refined, handsome features, and on how, in my past life, they had bewitched my heart and robbed me of reason. Qian Miao smiled. Princess, are you perhaps trying to comfort me? I blinked. Come to think of it, now that I've got used to you, you really aren't all that ugly. He gave a soft laugh, but said nothing. That I looked at him, then put my mask back on. Before, I never learned to live behind a mask, but by now, I suppose I have to. Qian Miao's gaze deepened as he looked at me. He removed his own mask and said, but what if there's a mask behind the mask? I didn't fully grasp his meaning and was about to ask, when he turned and walked a few paces away, sat down with a sweep of his robes, leaned against a boulder, and closed his eyes. That I started to speak, then swallowed the questions. Late into the night, Qian Miao escorted me to a spot not far from the city gate to avoid unnecessary trouble. He told me to ride into the city alone. That I ambled through the empty streets on horseback. As I reached the gates of the Marquis's residence, Ayan hurried up to me, her face frantic. Princess, where did you go? I patted her hand. Never mind, I'm back, aren't I? Prince Wei, he exhausted beyond measure. The mere mention of Prince Wei made me wave my hand hastily. That I hurried inside. The moment I entered my chambers, there was Yu Rang, seated rigidly in an armchair, staring at me with icy eyes. My heart tightened, but I kept my face calm. What are you doing here in the middle of the night? He leaned back, rubbing his wrist with his thumb. I should be asking you the same. Where have you been so late? I glanced at him sidelong. What business is it of yours? He shot to his feet and lunged forward, seizing my shoulders. His voice was trembling, sharp, and cold. At the Lantern Festival. Who was that man? Oh, there were so many men at the festival. Which one does Prince Wei mean? His eyes turned dark and menacing. Lin Erhuan, don't play dumb with me. Don't tell me you don't know the man who spirited you away. I pretended sudden comprehension. Ah, you mean him. The grip on my shoulders tightened savagely. Speak. Who is he? With a cold smile, I said slowly. What's this? Is Prince Wei interested in my lover? Yu Rang stiffened, and then rage exploded across his face. That refined, exquisitely beautiful face contorted in an instant. Lin Erhuan, he ground out through clenched teeth. Have you no shame? I narrowed my eyes at his face, mere inches from my own. In Prince Wei's understanding, does loving you count as having face, while loving someone else is shameless? He studied me for several seconds, his voice trembling slightly. Do you truly not care for me anymore? Without the slightest hesitation, I answered, no. The next moment, he wrapped an arm around my waist, pulled me hard against him, and a torrent of kisses rained down. However much I struggled, his arms never loosened, until he tore open the front of my short jacket with brutal force, and the warmth of his breath fell on the skin of my chest. My lashes closed, and tears fell. Suddenly, he froze. That I looked down and followed his gaze. His forefinger was gently brushing the red scar near my heart. When did you suffer a sword wound? He asked. His brow was knotted, his eyes full of disbelief. The clear tears slid down. That I met his gaze and said coolly, if Prince Wei can't remember, then forget it. Of course he couldn't remember that it was from our previous life. That scar had followed me back, an eternal reminder never to lose my heart to love. His face was aghast. When did I ever wound you? I simply stared at him, saying nothing. His arms, which had pinned me in place, gradually loosened. His expression clouded with confusion. My legs gave way, and I slid down against the doorframe. Huddling on the floor that I wrapped my arms around myself, not even glancing at him. Prince Wei has had his vent. Are you satisfied? Now leave. He paused, then continued. You get some rest first, that we'll talk another day. He lifted his foot and stepped over the threshold, going out. After his footsteps faded, Ayan rushed in and embraced me, anxiously asking, Princess, did Prince Wei hurt you? I unclenched my fist, revealing 4 red crescent-shaped nail marks in my palm. Seeing her worried face, I patted her arm gently and said slowly, It's fine that it's over now. The worst of it was long behind me. What I endured now barely counted as suffering. Ayan was quiet for a moment, then said, Princess, I used to think marrying Prince Wei would bring you every happiness. Now, I truly think maybe it's better if you don't. I forced a smile. Don't worry that I end this life. I won't marry him, but I'll make sure you get your wish. And mine, too. Before dawn broke, that scoundrel Qian Miao crept into my chambers again. That I lay in bed and watched him flip open the window and slip inside, as if he owned the place. He gave a little smile that I whispered icily. Have you become addicted to breaking into the Marquis's residence at night? He let his hands fall at his sides, standing before the window. That I in the candlelight, he smiled faintly. Of course, after all, I'm your lover. I stared at him. Did you plant a spy in the household? He raised a finger toward the ceiling. I've been on the roof this whole time. I rolled my eyes. So when I was being humiliated, my lover couldn't be bothered to save the damsel in distress. He spread his hands innocently. He had a full retinue of guards. One man. Me that I couldn't win that fight. I rolled my eyes again. Coward, not husband material. Qian Miao walked over and sat on the edge of my bed with a grin. Patience that a man who'd accomplished great things must know when to lie low. Retreat to advance. Then you keep the upper hand. Strike, and strike true. I gifted him yet another eye roll, so dramatic. Then his gaze dropped to my chest. That wound, was it really him? Does it matter who did it? Whoever it was, they should taste the same pain. I shook my head. There's no need. Seeing he was about to press further, I changed the subject. Qian Miao, a question that if the person you love doesn't love you back, what do? For some reason, as he looked at me, Qian Miao's gaze darkened. After a moment, the corner of his mouth lifted. Marry her first, then we'll see. I drew a breath. And what if the person you once loved didn't love you, and after you finally stop loving them, they come after you again? This time, he didn't hesitate. Tell them to piss off. I snorted with laughter. That harsh. With that, he lifted his foot, stepped over the threshold, and walked out. After his footsteps faded away, Ayan rushed over and threw her arms around me. Princess, did Prince Wei hurt you? I unclenched my fist point for deep red marks, left by my own nails digging into my palm. Seeing the worry and fear in her eyes, I gave her arm a light pat. I'm fine that it's over. The cruelest things I'd already endured. Whatever came now was nothing worth calling suffering. And fell silent for a moment, then said, Princess, I used to think marrying Prince Wei would bring you every kind of happiness, but now I truly believe it might be better if it never happens. I forced a smile. Don't worry that I end this life. I will not marry him. I promise you that. And I promised myself that too. Before the first light of dawn, that rascal Qian Miao paid another visit to my chamber. I lay in bed and watched as he slid the window open with practiced ease and slipped inside. That my voice came out flat. Breaking into the Marquis residence at night. Are you addicted to it now? He stood with his hands at his sides, framed by the window, and in the candlelight he gave a soft laugh. Well, of course, after all, I am your lover. My mouth fell open. Did you plant spies in the household? He pointed up at the roof. I've been perched up there the whole time. I cocked an eye toward the ceiling and huffed. Then when I was being bullied, where was my dashing hero to save the damsel in distress? He shrugged, looking entirely innocent. He brought a whole troop of guards that I'm just one man. I couldn't beat them. I rolled my eyes. Coward, not someone to count on. Qian Miao walked over and sat beside my bed, grinning. Patience that to accomplish great things, one must lie low and endure. Advance by retreating. Then you can seize victory in one decisive blow. I gave him another free eye roll. Pretentious nonsense. Then his gaze settled on my chest. He asked, was he really the one who stabbed you there? Does it matter who stabbed me? Whoever stabbed you, he should get a taste of the same pain. I shook my head. There's no need. Seeing he was about to press further, I changed the subject. Qian Miao, let me ask you something. If the person you love doesn't love you back, what would you do? For some reason, his eyes grew dark as he looked at me. After a moment, the corner of his mouth curved. Marry her first, then we'll see. I drew a breath. And what if the person you once loved didn't love you, and after you finally stop loving her, she comes after you again? This time he didn't hesitate. Tell her to get lost. I burst out laughing. That harsh? Sure, you can walk backwards, but not very far, he said, rising and going to the window. I hope you never look back. We have to look forward. His voice was deep, his figure resolute, and without a word he gave me a tremendous boost of courage. Long after Qian Miao had slipped back out the window and gone, I still stood there, watching the night melt bit by bit into the morning glow, listening to Ayan's thunderous snoring from the little side room. And at last, I laughed, like a complete idiot. One day, while I was lost in a lovely dream, Ayan came dashing in, all wild gestures, and shook me awake. Before I could fly into a rage, she looked at me with an expression like the kitchen was on fire. Princess, we're doomed. Prince Wei has gone to the Empress Dowager to request a marriage decree. Says he wants to marry you. I snapped, completely awake, and grabbed her arm. For real? I must have hurt her because she winced and asked weakly, Princess, are you happy or angry? The hell, happy my foot. I leapt out of bed, pulling on my clothes as I went. Who told you this? The moment Prince Wei left the Empress Dowager's palace, the news spread all through the capital. Damn, gossip is a fearsome thing. Princess, stop sighing over it. Think of something quick. I shoved on my shoes and dashed outside, shouting, Ready the carriage, we go to the palace. I'd barely reached the palace gate when Jiang Muchen blocked my carriage that I practically screamed. Move aside. Right now. Don't block the way. Without any hurry, Jiang Muchen said, Cousin, I advise you not to enter the palace today. Frowning, I asked, why not? The Empress Dowager and the Emperor are hosting a banquet today for the son of the Prince of Jinshuan. Even if you go, they likely won't have time to see you. What if I insist on going? Then if their majesties take offense, don't say your cousin didn't warn you. Furious, I pounded my thigh. Why does that damn son of the Prince of Jinshuan have to show up at a time like this? Jiang Muchen raised an eyebrow. Naturally, for the marriage alliance. The word marriage alliance made my eyes light up like twin lamps. Marriage alliance? Have they chosen the bride yet? Not yet, he said, pausing for effect. But it certainly won't be you, cousin. After all, Prince Wei has just asked the Empress Dowager for your hand. Hearing that, I wanted to jump off the carriage and punch him. Pinching the back of my waist and letting out a long breath, I said through clenched teeth, We'll see about that. Then I ordered the coachman to turn the carriage around and head home. On the way, I told Anne to stand watch outside the inn where the Prince of Jinshuan's son was staying and report to me the moment any news came. Once home, I bathed and perfumed myself, did my hair and makeup, rummaged through my wardrobe, and picked out a green embroidered silk dress I only wore for palace banquets. I had the most skilled maid in the household arrange an elaborate updo and pinned in a fine white jade hairpin. Then I sat before the mirror, my thoughts in a tangle. About 2 hours later, Ayan came running back, breathless, saying that Jiang Muchen had just returned to the inn, shaking out my skirts as I strode out. I asked, Ayan, tell me, dressed like this, will the Prince of Jinshuan's son fall for me at first sight and be so impatient to marry me? Ayan looked uncomfortable. Why would the princess throw herself at that ugly gourd? I frowned and scolded in a low voice. Mind your tongue. That ugly gourd might be my future husband, and stop calling him an ugly gourd. Ayan held up 2 fingers, ducking her head. Princess, you just said it twice yourself. I pouted. Oh, never mind that. Just tell me. The way I look, will he notice me? Ayan gave me a thorough once-over and nodded vigorously. Relax. That ugly gourd grew up on a godforsaken border where you can't find a single beauty. If you stand in front of him, princess, your beauty will stun him into croaking like a frog. Really? Think that ugly? Jiang Muchen can really be dazzled by me. Ayan nodded again with the fervor of a sworn suicide soldier, and so we went back and forth, me asking, her boosting, cheering each other on all the way to the inn. Jiang Muchen's guard stopped us and questioned me. I showed my marquee household token, and they let me in, but Ayan was kept outside. I shot her a meaningful look, telling her to wait for me in the tavern across the street. Nervous and uneasy, I followed the escorting guard up to the 2nd floor, through a winding corridor that turned and twisted several times, and stopped before a superior private room. After the guard announced me, a voice from inside said, "Come in." The guard pushed one half of the door open and gestured for me to enter. I let out a soft breath and stepped inside. The room was decorated with antique elegance, serene and refined. A faint scent of bamboo hung in the air. Glancing sideways, I saw a tall, slender figure standing before a painted screen, head bowed, wiping down a long sword in his hands. Sensing my gaze, he turned and smiled. Princess, what an honor to have you grace this humble place. That I, Jiang Muchen, am deeply honored. But to what do I owe the pleasure of your visit? The moment he turned around, I was completely stunned. That a single thought filled my mind. That bastard Jian Yueqing lied to me. Bloated figure, coarse features, all pure nonsense. Before me stood a man with superb bone structure. His sword-like brows slanted up to his hairline. His eyes blazed like bright stars. His nose rose proud as a mountain peak. Even the faint smile lines at the corners of his lips were handsome. And his build, broad shoulders and a solid chest, with hints of muscle visible even beneath his ink-black robe. He put even Yurong, who trained in martial arts all year, in the shade. Princess, if you stare at me like that, I must ask, is my appearance so appalling it has startled you? Snapping out of it, I saw Jiang Muchen regarding me with a smile in his eyes. That I gave a light cough. The general is too modest. With your godlike bearing, if there's any shock, it can only be of the stunning kind. He laid his long sword aside, sat down beside a small side table, and repeated, "What important business brings the princess here?" I steadied myself and came straight to the point. "General, did you come to the capital for the marriage alliance?" Jiang Muchen propped his chin on one hand and said lazily, "Isn't that common knowledge? In that case, would the general consider marrying me?" "Oh." His index finger paused at the corner of his eye. "I'm overwhelmed by the princess's regard, my gratitude overflowing. But I do wonder, why do I deserve such favor?" "Because I don't want to marry Prince Wei." So I want to marry you. I licked my lips. The general is a young hero, full of gallant spirit. I have long admired you. Jiang Muchen looked at me intently. Is there anything else? I was thrown. Anything else? What else? My mind raced. Then I clapped my hands lightly. Also, the general is so strikingly handsome. Anyone who sees you can't help but marvel at your divine bearing, myself included. He chuckled. From those words, it sounds as though the princess judges people by their looks. May I ask then, if I were truly as unsightly as the rumors claim, would the princess refuse to marry me? For some reason, the image of Qian Miao's plain face flashed into my mind, and I answered, the general misunderstands. I'm not someone who judges by appearances. He raised an eyebrow. Is that so? Yet I hear the princess and Prince Wei are childhood sweethearts, perfectly matched in heart and mind. Now that you're asking me to marry you, is it because you truly hold me in your heart, or because you intend to present me with a very fine green hat? He glanced meaningfully at my green silk dress as he said it. Damn it, that I really did pick the wrong dress. Clutching my sleeve, I drew a breath. Prince Wei and I grew up together, but our relationship has always been pure and innocent. There has never been the slightest impropriety between us. That on that point, the general can rest assured. Suddenly, Jiang Muchen rose and approached me, stopping barely half a step away. He was tall, his presence immensely imposing, but then he said softly, I believe you, princess. I looked up at him. His eyes were deep, filled with unreadable emotion. Still, I would like to see the princess's resolve. With that, he lowered his head slightly, his face stopping just a hand's breadth from mine. Staring at his sharp, thin lips, my heart seized. I jerked a step back, steadied myself, and said, I won't lie to you that I did once have feelings for Prince Wei. But if we are married, as long as you treat me decently, and combined with that face of yours, I should, probably, maybe no, I will do my utmost to devote my heart to you. The smile at Jiang Muchen's lips deepened. Very well. Then please, princess, go home and wait patiently for good news. On the carriage ride back, Ayan kept chattering in my ear, asking whether the ugly gourd had bullied me. With one hand I kneaded my weak, trembling thigh, and with the other I pinched Ayan's waist. Ayan, remember this. Never say a word against Jiang Muchen ever again. Don't even think it in your heart. That man is inscrutable, no ordinary person. We can't afford to offend him. Ayan yelped in pain, blinked, and just agreed fervently. The next few days, I had no appetite for food or drink. That I couldn't sit still, couldn't stand still, fretting and waiting for news from Jiang Muchen. Instead of good news, I caught wind of a rumor. He had taken a fancy to Zhongyu, and the emperor intended to grant a marriage decree favoring him. Cursing under my breath, that bastard Jiang Muchen, playing me dirty. I tucked my luminous pearl into my bosom and rushed to the palace. The empress, Dowager, looked troubled. She said that she and the emperor had long intended to settle the marriage between me and Prince Wei. But for now the priority was the marriage alliance. Our match would have to be put aside for the time being. I begged for quite some time, but the Empress Dowager gave no firm answer, only told me to go home and wait. Thoroughly dejected, just as I stepped over the threshold of her palace, I was yanked into a corner by Yurong, who had been hiding behind the Vermilion Gate, his face blazing with anger. I helped you win that luminous pearl so you could use it, not so you could refuse a marriage proposal. I shook off his arm and turned aside. I clearly won it myself. Without me sending men to secretly assist you. Do you think you'd ever have scored that final goal? So the unfamiliar young player at the polo match had been one of his people. I hugged the pearl tighter. There are no ifs. A win is a win. Prince Wei, rather than blaming me now, You should blame yourself for helping me in the first place. Lin Erhuan, he let out a long sigh before continuing. Why do you hate me so much? You were never like this before. Yesterday's me is not the same as today's me, let alone the me of the past. I used to give you my heart and soul, and you treated it like dirt. Now I've stopped. What's your complaint? My surname is Lin, not cheap. There's no reason to keep being treated coldly and still savor it like honey. Was it because of Chai Qingxue that you're treating me like this? I can explain that I don't like her. It's just, before, you pestered me so much I got annoyed, His words made my stomach turn. So you used her as a shield. Fine. Just fine. The great Prince Wei, who's always claimed to be a righteous gentleman, could actually utter something so contemptible. I thought of how I'd once harmed Chai Qingxue over a man like this, and a wave of self-loathing struck me, along with a piercing ache of guilt for her. Tears brimmed in my eyes and spilled over. You never loved me, yet you never rejected me. You never loved her, either, yet you never made that clear to her. She and I spent years hating each other because of you. Truly, it was all for nothing. Yurong, who had been silent for a long while, finally lifted his head, his voice almost pleading. Erhuan, yes, I was wrong before. That I'll apologize to Chai Qingxue. That I'll apologize to whoever you want. But please, don't fight with me any longer. Give me a chance. Let me try to make it up to you, all right? I scoffed. You can't make it up, and I don't want you to. My words struck him so hard he reeled. Steadying himself, he pressed his lips together, the sorrow in his eyes fading into a flash of ruthlessness. Just as you said, there are no if-onlys. Lin Erhuan, no matter how much you despise me, don't think you can escape our marriage. I will marry you. With that, he swept away, sleeves snapping. Though he towered over me in power, he looked like a soldier fleeing in defeat. For the next fortnight, Yurong sent men bearing betrothal gifts every day, and every day I drove them out by force. During that time, I considered marrying someone else. But with my betrothal to Prince Wei, the talk of the capital, no one would have me, and no one dared. That I also thought about running off. I drafted a letter for Jiang Muchen to deliver to Qian Miao. Qian Miao, would you dare defy the whole world and take me away? After a bitter smile, I crumpled the paper. He was just a guard. Why drag him down with me? I even thought about ending it all. But after I tossed the white silk over the beam, I stepped down from the stool. After I sharpened the dagger, I made a shallow cut on my finger, then set it aside. After I stirred rat poison into sugar water, I fed it to the osmanthus tree outside my room. That I couldn't yet tell if the tree would live, but the ants beneath it dropped dead in droves. Ba, what a sin. Just as I was sinking into despair, the crown prince ran into trouble. He had embezzled flood relief funds for Jiangnan, enraging the emperor. But the prince wept and wailed before the throne, accusing Prince Wei of framing him. Wei was consequently confined to his residence pending investigation. That I knew Yurong well enough. He had lofty ambitions, eager to prove himself in court and win the emperor's favor, but he would never harm his own brother. Much as I hated marrying him, I couldn't just watch him be wrongly accused. Yet the tables turned quickly. General Zhong, along with a group of senior ministers, presented evidence before the emperor, confirming the crown prince's guilt. Wei was cleared. Then the ministers unearthed a long trail of the prince's crimes. The more the emperor had once doted on him, the more he now loathed him for deceiving his sovereign, defying filial duty, and acting with savagery. Finally, on the day of summer's start, a decree was issued to all under heaven. The crown prince was deposed, but what stunned me even more came just before lesser fullness. The emperor decreed a marriage between Yurong and Zhongyu. Unlike the earlier rumors about Yurong and me, this was an imperial edict in the emperor's own hand that no one could refuse. Oh yes. Crisis averted. I was dying to know how everything could turn so drastically in barely 3 months. But like most people, I had no way of finding out. Still, escaping the marriage was a good thing. Even if the words coming from others' mouths were foul and unbearable, gossip flourished. I was the daughter of Marquis Ning, but with my parents long gone, I offered no political advantage, and so Prince Wei had abandoned me for Zhongyu. Even Jiang Muchen, that peace marriage general who had barely made his presence known, got dragged in. People said Zhongyu had looked down on him. He'd come to the capital seeking a wife, failed to get one, and only sullied his name that I figured a little time and fresh scandals would bury the rumors. But 10+ days later, the gossip only grew. Every time Prince Wei and General Zhong left court together, Jiang Muchen and I were dragged out for another round of pitying sighs. Annoying? Yes. A bit. 3 days later, the Empress Dowager summoned me to the palace. When I stepped into the hall, I found the Emperor and Jiang Muchen already there, and a banquet laid out. While I was still trying to figure out what this lineup meant, the Emperor spoke that he said the rumors were groundless. He had intended all along for the marriage to be between Prince Wei and Zhongyu, and had long since chosen me as the bride for the peace alliance. The only reason for all this misunderstanding was that the prince and Jiang Muchen had entered the palace one after the other that day. My brain screamed. What the hell kind of excuse is that? He's just making things up. I turned a speechless face toward the emperor, only to have the dowager flash me a pointed look. I glanced desperately at Jiang Muchen, but the man wouldn't even look at me. He rose, walked to the center of the hall, raised his clasped hands toward the throne, and bowed his head. Your servant Jiang Muchen thanks His Majesty for bestowing this marriage. My mind short-circuited. The emperor glanced sideways at me. What? Does the Princess Commandery have some objection to my arrangement? A cold sweat beaded instantly down my back. Shaking my head like a rattle drum, I hurried to Jiang Muchen's side, curtsied, and said, Your servant thanks His Majesty for bestowing this marriage. The emperor nodded with satisfaction and beckoned us to sit and dine. The meal was like chewing wax. Between bites, I stole glances at Jiang Muchen that he acted as if nothing were amiss, lifting his cup with that placid smile, betraying not a trace of emotion. This man not only lost the woman his heart desired, but got hoodwinked by the emperor and forced to marry me. And now he had to stay and force a smile. Truly rotten luck. When he silently toasted me for the 3rd time, I raised my cup, returned the gesture, and drained it in one go. We're all pitiful souls. After the meal, the emperor called Jiang Muchen aside for a discussion that I stayed behind in the dowager's chamber. She comforted me, saying that sending me off for the marriage alliance was a matter of necessity. Jiang Muchen fared better than I did. By the time he left Qinda Hall, he had gained an extra title, Marquis Dingen. With the gossip dying down, Ayan was busy at our residence inventorying the dowry that I slipped out to clear. My head. Passing the Prime Minister's gate, I saw Chai Qingxue loading box after box onto a carriage. She was leaving. I hurried over and asked where she was going. She said she was going to find someone very important. As we parted, I stood below the carriage and looked up at her through the window. At last, I spoke the words, I'm sorry. She paused. Then her face bloomed into a brilliant smile. I should be thanking you. Without you, I would never have met the man I truly love. I froze. She too had been given a second chance by heaven, just like me. And then we looked at each other and smiled, and no words were exchanged, yet everything was said. That summer dusk, a gentle breeze blew, and years of enmity dissolved in a single breath. Watching the carriage recede, I sighed inwardly. Asterisk, a whole lifetime spent as enemies with this clever and resolute woman. What a waste. Asterisk, when I turned, I saw Yurong walking toward me, eyes full of sorrow. After so many days unseen, he looked terribly worn. Last night I dreamed I stabbed you, he said. After you married me, I treated you badly, and then you died on a winter night. Even at the end, I never came to see you once. Erhuan, tell me, was it real? The petty, vengeful part of me wanted to say, yes, it's true. But looking at his anguished expression, I remembered the younger days when he had been kind to me. Forget it this final parting. Why cut with words that would leave him in torment for the rest of his life? Let him chase a dead marriage back to the grave. Not worth it. Making a person carry guilt forever is nothing to be proud of. I gave a faint smile. That's why they call it a dream. He made as if to press further. I drew my sleeve from his loosened grasp and said gently, Prince Wei, your wedding with the general's daughter is imminent. Don't cling to the past and wound your future wife. His expression faltered, his lashes trembling, but at last he let go. With a soft farewell, I turned and left the corner. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw him still rooted to the spot, his silhouette stretched long by the slanting sun. My steps hesitated for a beat. I swept aside a stray lock of hair from my eyes and continued towards Xianshu Tower to buy the salted egg yolk pastries Ayan loved. Any later, and they'd be sold out. Half a month later, the Empress Dowager and the Emperor held a farewell banquet for Jiang Muchen and me. We set off for his territory. I was dressed in splendid bridal robes, a crown of jade and kingfisher feathers weighing on my head. With Ayan supporting me, my neck stiff, I minced slowly out the door. Through my pearl veil, I saw Jiang Muchen in full military garb, standing beside a fine steed, tall and gallant, his brows raised in a smile. Ayan beside me stared, slack-jawed, and only snapped out of it after I pinched her several times. Jiang Muchen's towering frame blocked the harsh sun as he reached to help me into the carriage. When my hand touched his, I caught a glimpse. Long, well-proportioned, and strong. But before I could look more closely, the curtain dropped. Once inside, Ayan stared at me and murmured, "The Marquis is that handsome. Whoever called him ugly must have pus in their eyes." I ignored her and leaned against the dowry chests, closing my eyes to rest. All along the road, drums and gongs thundered, congratulations endless. When we reached the city gate, Ayan lowered the side curtain and leaned in furtively. "My lady, I just caught sight of Prince Wei." I kept my eyes shut and merely said, "So be it. But from now on, don't mention him again." Outside the city, Jiang Muchen ordered his men to pick up the pace, and in less than 3 days we arrived at Yuqiao Pass. Just after clearing the pass, he called from outside the carriage, "Miss Ayan, may I board and speak with my wife?" I had only just removed the heavy crown and hurriedly put it back on. Straightening my posture and exchanging a glance with Ayan, I said, "General, we haven't yet bowed before the ancestors in marriage. That would be improper." As soon as I finished, Jiang Muchen abruptly lifted the carriage curtain, smiling. I had no idea my wife was so scrupulous. He looked at Ayan, and she flinched and scrambled out without a backward glance. Though Jiang Muchen was tall and broad, he was agile. A long leg swung up, and he was inside, a wooden box in his hand. Once seated, he held the box between us, a meeting gift for my wife. I forced a laugh. "It's hardly our first meeting, General. That you're too kind." His eyes curved. "Precisely because it isn't our first meeting, I must give it to you." He shook the box lightly. "Open it, there's a surprise." Unable to refuse, I took the box, set it on my lap, and lifted the lid. Inside lay a ferocious Taotai mask. "Here." I stared wide-eyed at the grinning Jiang Muchen across from me. All words stuck in my throat. Ayan the next instant. My feet left the floor as the box tumbled aside. He pulled me into his arms, swept aside my pearl veil, and his lips met mine. By the time our breathing was ragged, our noses were still touching. He murmured against my lips. I've wanted to do that for a long time. Heart pounding, I pushed out words between my teeth. Qian Miao, you bastard. You played me. He raised 4 fingers beside his ear, feigning innocence. I swear, I only schemed against others, never against you. I squirmed out of his arms and back into my seat, glaring. Don't talk. Now I ask, you answer, and you'd better tell the truth. That if you dare hide anything, may our children be born without. I stopped short. Jiang Muchen scratched his chin. Isn't that a bit harsh for our future children? I snapped, shut up. He leaned forward, took my hand, and said softly, don't be angry. Let me tell you, all right? He began slowly. The emperor has long feared my father's power. My father was deeply troubled. Coincidentally, Jian Yueqing is a close friend, so I disguised myself and came to the capital as his guard to gather intelligence. The first day I entered the palace, I ran into you fighting with Miss Chai. We spent more time together. I began to want to marry you. That day at court, I originally meant to ask the emperor for your hand, but Prince Wei spoke first, so I changed my plan on the spot. What did you do? I suddenly felt a chill. Lowering my voice, I asked, the Crown Prince's scandal, Prince Wei's confinement. Were you behind it? Jiang Muchen gently rubbed my wrist as he explained. The Crown Prince had been corrupt for a long time. The ministers already favored Prince Wei as heir. The emperor doted on the prince, though he recognized Wei's talent. If I had openly competed with Wei, wouldn't that have planted trouble for our married life down the road? And then, so I put out word that I had taken a liking to General Zhong's daughter. Everyone knew Zhong Yu favored the Prince of Wei, and General Zhong doted on his daughter. Naturally, he wouldn't want her married off to the borderlands. Even this stalwart neutral in the power struggle was forced to lean toward the Prince of Wei. Jiang Muchen paused for breath and went on. The Crown Prince had embezzled flood relief funds meant for Jiangnan, and the emperor was furious that I pulled a few strings to make the Crown Prince's faction turn on the Prince of Wei at that point. If the Prince of Wei wanted to clear his name, he would need a revered elder minister to vouch for him. Chancellor Chai was long bedridden and couldn't step forward, so that left only General Zhong to ask the price of exoneration and a shot at the throne. The Prince of Wei had no choice but to marry Zhong Yu. A chill ran down my spine. I pulled my hand out of his grasp. Jiang Muchen, that's ruthless calculation. He glanced at my hand. It isn't ruthlessness. It's human nature. The Crown Prince envied the Prince of Wei. The Prince of Wei craved power. General Zhong loved his daughter. All I did was pour a little oil on that dry tinder so the fire would burn faster and brighter. I shot him a look. You said you never schemed against me. Then what about all that gossip afterward? I was naive enough to think you were forced into marrying me. He gave a sheepish laugh and grabbed my hand again. I was wrong. I was wrong. That part was truly my fault. But to make amends, I did let word spread that Zhong Yu had rejected me. My voice shot up. You have the nerve to mention it. Even the Emperor and the Empress Dowager were fooled by a fox spirit like you. He pressed his index finger to my lips. Shoo, keep your voice down. Dio, you want to make yourself a widow before the wedding? Drop dead, I said, shoving him. You only got lucky if the Crown Prince hadn't fallen from grace. You'd be nothing but a rat on its back, utterly useless. Jiang Muchen clasped his hands behind his head and smiled. Well, there's no if. Besides, if that plan had failed, I had others. I would have found a way to get you out of the capital and marry you. Dream on, I scoffed, curling my lip. When he raised an eyebrow with a believe what you will look, my curiosity got the better of me. What other schemes did you have? The corner of his mouth lifted. My father had no intention of defying the court. The current emperor is naturally suspicious and uneasy about my father's autonomous control over his domain. Before I came to the capital, my father entrusted me with the seal of administration and told me I must present it. If things had turned out as you said, with the crown prince unscathed, I would have offered the seal and openly asked the emperor for your hand. Admittedly, that would have made an enemy of the Prince of Wei. So you didn't give up the seal? Of course I did. Why wouldn't I hand over a piece of stone to set the emperor at ease? And without it, this Marquis of Dingen title would never have landed on your husband's head. Watching his smug expression, I felt both anger and delight. Anger that he'd kept me in the dark, delight that he had worn himself out scheming and planning just to marry me. I turned, pulled the porcupine mask from my dowry chest, and threw it into his arms. A mask beneath a mask. I think even 1,000 wouldn't be enough for your face, I said sourly. Jiang Muchen burst out laughing. Then he picked up the Taotai mask from the floor, and, together with the porcupine mask, hurled them both out the carriage window. I gave a soft cry. Hey! He winked at me. From now on, no more masks. Fair enough that I'd never learned to wear the blasted things anyway. I still had questions. When had he first felt anything for me? If he'd only decided to marry me after we gradually got to know each other, why had he egged me on to steal the luminous pearl the second time we met, and then never even used it? I was about to ask, but he cut me off. Too many stories that I'll tell you little by little later. He plucked the ceremonial crown from my head, tossed it aside, and offered me his hand with a grin. Come on, it's too stuffy in the carriage. Let's go riding. Infected by his mood, I smiled and placed my right hand in his. As we parted the carriage curtain together, Ayan was there rubbing her bruised forehead, eyes full of reproach. Lord Marquis, must you throw things out the window and hit people? Jiang Muchen and I both burst out laughing at the same moment. The sky stretched high and boundless, cloudless and clear, riding the same swift horse, my wedding gown fluttering in the wind. Our laughter echoed across the grasslands that we galloped with wild abandon, utterly free, utterly alive. The end.